Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a topic that's been requested a bunch. Nice guys. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Awesome.
So get ready to unpack the hidden struggles of nice guys. We'll uncover what makes an ideal man, and most importantly, we're giving you some actionable strategies for, personal growth.
Right on. It's funny because we've all encountered those nice guys, right? But the book really digs into the downsides, the stuff we don't always see.
Yeah, totally. Like what's hiding beneath the surface of this, seemingly harmless persona.
Exactly.
The video actually gives this example of a guy, Mark, who seems like the perfect partner on the surface. Always willing to help, put his girlfriend's needs first, never causes any drama. But underneath, he's got all this resentment brewing.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
He feels ignored, and his niceness isn't really genuine kindness. It's more about seeking validation.
Right, and that's a classic example of what Dr. Glover calls the nice guy syndrome. It's this weird paradox where guys think being nice will, guarantee them love and happiness, but they end up feeling resentful and totally unfulfilled.
Totally. And the book says this outward focus is often because they're scared of being vulnerable. So nice guys have a hard time chasing their own passions and, even saying what they need.
Yeah, for sure.
Our guy, Mark, he's terrified of confrontation. So instead of telling his girlfriend how he feels, he just keeps quiet and lets that resentment simmer.
It's never good.
And get this, the book traces this pattern all the way back to their childhood.
Interesting. So are you saying it's like a learned behavior?
That's exactly what Glover argues. He says this nice guy mindset develops early on, often because of a fear of abandonment.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection.
These men, they might have had experiences as kids where they felt like they had to be good to earn love, avoid rejection.
Right, makes sense.
So they develop this belief that their needs are, secondary, and their worth depends on how much they please others.
Wow. So for Mark, maybe he had a parent who was emotionally distant or super critical?
Exactly. He learns to suppress his own needs and becomes hyper-focused on pleasing that parent to get their approval.
And that pattern, it gets ingrained, right? And then it shows up in his adult relationships.
You got it. He might even seek out partners who, without realizing it, keep that dynamic going. That's where the video's three-step process comes in: abandonment, shame, and self-doubt.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the abandonment leads to this deep shame, like they're fundamentally flawed for even having needs.
Oh, wow.
And then that shame turns into crippling self-doubt. It makes it even harder to assert themselves or believe they deserve happiness. So it's not just about being a people pleaser. It goes way deeper.
It's like a whole web of interconnected stuff. And it impacts their lives in such concrete ways, like their career, their relationships, everything.
So let's get practical. It highlights 4 major problems nice guys run into. First one, living for others and constantly chasing that validation we talked about.
Right. So instead of going after their own goals and dreams, they're consumed with meeting everyone else's expectations.
And that leads to them feeling empty because their happiness depends on what other people think, not on their own self-worth.
It's like they're always looking outward for approval instead of looking inside. And that brings us to the second problem, the whole difficulty in acknowledging their own needs.
It's like they've become so good at putting others first, they can't even tell what they want or need, let alone say it out loud.
Yeah.
It's like they're afraid of asserting themselves because it feels selfish to them.
Oh, that's gotta be tough.
And because they don't actually say what they need, they build up all these unspoken expectations.
Which, let's be real, usually leads to disappointment and resentment.
Big time. And that takes us to problem number 3, and this one's fascinating: denying their own power and masculinity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Well, this is where Glover brings in how society views men,
Okay.
He says nice guys often buy into this idea that showing vulnerability or asking for help makes them less masculine.
So they equate being a man with being stoic, independent, and emotionally closed off.
Exactly. And that prevents them from having those deep, genuine connections that they actually crave.
So it's like they're trapped in this box of what they think a real man should be, and it's actually preventing them from experiencing a whole range of emotions.
You nailed it. And this leads to the 4th problem that the video highlights: struggling with intimacy and ending up in relationships that just don't work.
It's like a vicious cycle. They can't fully express themselves or ask for what they need, so they wind up feeling invisible and unheard.
And they might even attract partners who take advantage of their niceness or who
Mm.
keep that whole damsel in distress dynamic going.
Right, because they need to be rescued. And breaking free from this, it's got to be so hard because they might not even realize they're stuck until they're super unhappy.
So where's the way out? Well, the video introduces this idea of the ideal man as kind of an antidote to the nice guy.
Okay, so what does that even mean? Is it like some unrealistic image of masculinity?
It's important to remember that the ideal man isn't about fitting into some stereotype, like being a macho alpha male or hiding your feelings.
So it's not about looks or a specific personality type. Got it.
Exactly. It's more of a mindset, a way of being. The ideal man is self-aware, embraces who he truly is, and sets healthy boundaries in his relationships.
Sounds healthy.
And he puts his well-being first, but without sacrificing his kindness or compassion.
That sounds like a way more balanced approach to life and relationships.
Right, but how do you actually make that shift from nice guy to ideal man?
Yeah.
Seems like a huge change.
It definitely takes work and some deep self-reflection,
Mhm.
but it is possible. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll get into Dr. Glover's strategies for making that transformation.
Awesome. This has been such an eye-opening start to our deep dive. It's crazy how breaking down these seemingly simple concepts can reveal so much about how we behave, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff.
I'm already seeing some patterns in my own life.
Me too. It's fascinating.
Can't wait to dive into those strategies next time. We'll be back after a short break.
Sounds good.
And we're back with the deep dive. Before the break, we were like really getting into the world of nice guys and all the challenges they face. But now we're going to shift gears. We're going to explore Dr. Glover's strategies for actually transforming, ditching that nice guy mindset and actually living a more fulfilling life. I'm ready to get practical here. Like, how can someone like our hypothetical Mark actually change,
Well, yeah, it's important to remember that this isn't some overnight fix. It's a process, right? It takes work, it takes looking inward, and it takes time to really undo those deep-seated patterns.
Right, totally.
Dr. Glover lays out a whole bunch of strategies, and the YouTube video we're using, it sums up some of the most important ones.
Perfect. Let's jump into those. So the video starts with self-reflection.
Yeah, self-reflection. It's all about becoming aware of those like approval-seeking habits that we talked about, right? The video suggests like really paying attention to those moments when you feel that urge to please others, even if it means going against what you want.
So like asking yourself, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to get out of this?
Exactly. Like in Mark's case, if his girlfriend asks him to do something, and he doesn't really want to do it, instead of just saying yes automatically, he could, pause for a second. Ask himself, am I doing this because I actually want to, or am I just afraid of making her mad?
That's the real reason I'm about to do this thing.
Exactly. And that leads us to the next strategy. Learning to, actually express your emotions, but for real. Nicest. Guys, they tend to bottle everything up.
And that can lead to resentment, even like outbursts of anger.
Right, it's like a pressure cooker, right? It builds and builds, and then
Just
you...
click.
Exactly. And the book connects this back to that fear of showing vulnerability. So how does someone like Mark, how do they actually break free?
Well, the video really emphasizes finding a safe space, like with a therapist, a close friend, or even a men's group. It's about finding people you trust, people who will listen without judgment,
Right, and that's where the whole bonding with other men thing comes in, right? The video highlights that as a super important for like breaking out of those unhealthy masculine norms that we were talking about.
Yeah, because when you're surrounded by other men who are comfortable expressing their emotions and being vulnerable, it challenges that whole idea that real men don't show their feelings.
Totally. It's like instead of feeling like you have to be stoic and strong all the time, you can actually let your guard down and connect on a deeper level.
And those connections, they can give you so much support and guidance as you're on this, personal growth journey.
For sure. The book even suggests joining men's groups or finding a mentor, someone who embodies healthy masculinity.
So for Mark, who always felt kind of isolated and never really knew how to connect with other guys authentically, joining a men's group could be huge. He could see other guys openly talking about their struggles and fears.
Yeah.
Maybe that would give him the courage to do the same.
Right. It's about creating that safe space to like challenge those old ideas about what it means to be a man and learning from others who are, on a similar path.
This is all making so much sense, but it also sounds, pretty daunting, especially for someone like Mark, who's spent his whole life trying to avoid conflict and please everyone.
Yeah, it's not easy.
The video also talks about setting boundaries, which has got to be a huge EE challenge for nice guys.
It definitely can be. But it's so important for having healthy relationships.
So true.
The book is really clear about this. Boundaries aren't about being mean or controlling. They're about, respecting yourself, knowing your limits.
So instead of always saying yes to his girlfriend to avoid disappointing her, Mark could start practicing saying no when something doesn't feel right to him.
Right. He could start saying what he needs, what he wants, even if it means, like, having a tough conversation.
And that's probably going to feel super uncomfortable at first, especially if he's always put everyone else first.
Yeah, for sure. But the book says, with practice, it gets easier. It becomes more natural.
This reminds me of a quote from the video that really stuck with me. It said, "The ideal man understands that his needs are valid, and he communicates them clearly without apology."
I like that. It's all about self-respect and knowing your worth, something that nice guys often struggle with.
And this leads to another strategy the video talks about, changing how you approach relationships. So instead of always looking for validation or trying to fix their partners, the ideal man comes into relationships with integrity and confidence.
Right. He's not searching for someone to complete him or rescue him. He's looking for an equal partner, someone who respects him and shares his values.
And that's where being able to express your needs and set boundaries right from the start is so important. You're not trying to be what you think your partner wants. You're being yourself, flaws and all.
Exactly. And that authenticity, it's attractive. It lets you connect with people for real.
The video even talks about welcoming fear, which sounds a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what? But the idea is fear is normal. It's part of life. And trying to avoid it just keeps us stuck.
So, like, if Mark is totally terrified of talking to his girlfriend about something that's bothering him, instead of avoiding that conversation, he could choose to face that fear head on.
Right. And remind himself that even if it's uncomfortable, it's better than letting that resentment just fester.
And the more he practices facing his fears, the less power they have over him.
Exactly. It's like building emotional muscle.
This reminds me of something else the video mentioned, reframing negative thoughts. So instead of letting self-doubt take over, try to see it as a chance to, challenge those beliefs and be kinder to yourself.
It's about shifting from I'm not good enough to I deserve love and respect. I can make positive changes.
That's a huge shift in perspective. It's recognizing that you have the power to choose how you react to those negative thoughts. You can create a new story for yourself.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key strategy, developing integrity.
Okay, integrity, that sounds pretty big. What does that actually look like, in terms of becoming the ideal man?
Well, the video defines it as choosing honesty over, being fake, even when it's hard. It's about living by your values, even when it's uncomfortable.
So for Mark, that might mean being honest with his girlfriend about how he feels, instead of pretending everything's okay, or speaking up at work, even if he's afraid of causing trouble.
Exactly. It's about being real, being true to yourself, even when it's tough. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Like building a muscle, right? It seems like there's a common thread running through all of these strategies. It's about taking responsibility for your life, for your choices, instead of letting fear and insecurity call the shots.
You got it. It's about shifting from, being passive and reactive to being proactive and in control.
It's like you become the author of your own story, instead of letting other people write it for you.
Love that analogy. That's exactly what becoming the ideal man is all about.
And speaking of the ideal man, the video does this really cool comparison between the nice guy and the ideal man across different areas of life. It's like a roadmap for seeing how these two personas show up in the world,
Yeah, it's a great tool for, checking in with yourself, seeing where you might be falling into those nice guy traps and where you're already embodying some of those ideal man qualities.
So let's walk through it. It starts with how they handle conflict. As we've talked about, the nice guy. He avoids conflict like the plague.
He'll do anything to smooth things over, change the subject, even pretend that everything's fine when it's totally not.
Anything to avoid rocking the boat.
Right. He'd rather just suffer in silence than deal with the issue head on. The ideal man, though, he sees conflict as a normal part of life, even an opportunity to grow.
He doesn't shy away from tough conversations.
He approaches them with respect, with assertiveness, understanding that, hey, sometimes a little healthy conflict can actually make relationships stronger.
He's not afraid to speak his mind,
Yeah.
even if it leads to some disagreement. And this ties into boundaries. Nice guys, they have a tough time with boundaries.
Yeah, they often let people walk all over them. They're the ultimate people pleasers. No, it's not in their vocabulary.
The ideal man, though, he sets clear boundaries right from the get-go. He knows his limits, and he's not afraid to communicate them.
He can say no without feeling guilty about it. He puts his needs first. And this difference, it extends to like how they view their needs in general.
Yeah, nice guys always put everyone else's needs before their own. They neglect themselves in the process.
And even when they're feeling resentful, even when they're burning out, they still struggle to speak up.
They're so worried about seeming selfish.
Right. But the ideal man, he gets it. He knows his needs are just as important as anyone else's. He takes care of himself, but that doesn't mean he's not kind or compassionate.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And this brings us to how they deal with flaws and mistakes. Nice guys. They often try to hide their imperfections, pretend they don't exist.
They might even try to overcompensate by being extra nice.
They're so afraid of being judged or rejected, they put on this whole perfect act. The ideal man, though, he embraces his flaws. He sees them as part of what makes him human.
He sees them as opportunities to learn and grow, right?
Right. He's not afraid to be vulnerable, to show his struggles. It's all about self-acceptance instead of self-judgment.
And this difference in mindset also shows up in how they communicate. So nice guys, they often keep their true thoughts and feelings bottled up, afraid of upsetting people or causing conflict.
And then they end up exploding, which can really damage their relationships.
It's like they're walking on eggshells all the time, scared to say the wrong thing.
The ideal man, on the other hand, he communicates openly and honestly.
He expresses his needs, his concerns, his desires, even if they're not always met with, open arms. He knows that clear communication is key for healthy relationships.
Absolutely. And this leads us to the last point of comparison. Relationships. Nice, guys. They often end up in relationships that are just plain unsatisfying, sometimes even dysfunctional.
They might attract partners who take advantage of them or who reinforce that belief that they're not good enough.
Right, because they're not setting boundaries or saying what they need. They end up feeling resentful, unfulfilled. The ideal man, though, he creates relationships that are based on mutual respect, trust, and open communication. He's able to be vulnerable, to be authentic with his partner, and he feels good about expressing his needs and desires.
He attracts partners who value him for who he is, not for what he can do for them. This comparison really shows how the nice guy and the ideal man approach life from totally different angles. It's almost like they're living in different realities.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that changing how you act is just one part of it. The real change happens inside, in your thoughts, your beliefs, your values.
This brings us to a cool part of the video where it visually shows the nice guy's journey versus the ideal man's journey. It's like two roads that start at the same point but lead to completely different places.
Oh, I like that visual. It makes the whole personal growth thing a lot easier to understand.
So picture this. Both the nice guy and the ideal man, they start out wanting the same things, right? Love, acceptance, happiness. They set off on their journeys with the best intentions.
But as they go along, their paths start to split.
The nice guy's path is like narrow and winding. It's full of obstacles and detours.
He keeps tripping over his insecurities, getting lost in trying to please everyone else.
The ideal man's path, though, it gets wider and brighter as he goes.
He's surrounded by supportive people, and he's driven by a sense of purpose, you know?
Yeah, like knowing his worth.
Exactly. He sees challenges as opportunities for growth.
And this visual, it just perfectly illustrates that becoming the ideal man, it's not a destination, it's an ongoing journey. You're always growing, always evolving.
And it's about realizing that you have the power to choose which path you want to take.
Let's talk about the last part of the video, which is all about the positive stuff that happens when you actually make this transformation. It's like, reaching the top of a mountain after a long, hard climb.
It's about enjoying the view after all that effort.
The video highlights a bunch of positive outcomes, and it starts with becoming more self-aware.
Yeah, you start to understand your thoughts, your feelings, your needs. You recognize those patterns of people-pleasing and self-sabotage that have been holding you back.
And that self-awareness leads to, accepting yourself more.
Right. You start to embrace your flaws, see them as part of what makes you, you.
You stop comparing yourself to other people and trying to be perfect.
You realize that you're worthy of love and belonging just the way you are.
And all of that leads to a boost in confidence.
You don't need constant validation from others anymore.
You feel more comfortable being yourself, and you go after your goals with more, assertiveness.
And as your confidence grows, you're able to build relationships that are more real, more fulfilling.
You attract people who appreciate you for you.
You're able to set boundaries, communicate your needs, and deal with conflict in a healthy way. And all of this leads to feeling empowered and, genuinely fulfilled.
You feel in control of your life, and you're able to create the kind of relationships and experiences that actually bring you joy and meaning.
It's like a domino effect. As you change internally, your external world starts to change too.
It's proof that personal growth, it really can transform your life.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we move on, I want to make sure we circle back to that comparison between the nice guy and the ideal man from the source.
Yeah, good idea. We covered a lot, and it's good to bring it all together.
So let's go back to our hypothetical nice guy, Mark. We know he avoids conflict, struggles with boundaries, and constantly seeks validation from his girlfriend. But let's say he starts using some of these strategies we talked about. He starts paying attention to when he's saying yes, when he really means no. He joins a men's group to practice expressing his feelings and connect with guys who have a healthier view of masculinity. And he starts setting boundaries with his girlfriend, telling her what he needs, and standing up for himself when those needs aren't met. What do you think would happen?
Well, I don't think it would be easy or happen overnight. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, maybe even some pushback from people who are used to him being the nice guy. But if he keeps practicing these new behaviors, if he keeps shifting his mindset, I think he'd start to see some big changes in his life.
Like what specifically?
Well, for one, I think he'd start to feel less resentful and more empowered in his relationship. By setting boundaries and expressing his needs, he'd be taking responsibility for his own happiness instead of relying on his girlfriend to make him happy.
That's a big shift. He wouldn't feel like a victim anymore. He'd be in control.
Exactly. And as his self-confidence grows, he might even start attracting different types of partners, people who are more emotionally mature and who can have healthy, balanced relationships. He wouldn't feel the need to rescue or fix them anymore. He'd be looking for a true partner, someone who respects him and gets him.
That's amazing. It shows that we really do have the power to change our lives.
Absolutely. It's never too late to start becoming the ideal man.
Okay, I'm ready to wrap up this deep dive, but before we do, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about how being a nice guy can be a problem and how becoming the ideal man can be the solution. But is there a danger in overdoing it? Is it possible to swing too far in the other direction?
That's a great question. You're wondering if there's a risk of becoming too assertive, too focused on your own needs and forgetting about others.
Exactly. Is there a sweet spot where you can be strong, A&D sensitive, assertive, A&D compassionate? Can you be an ideal man without losing your empathy or your ability to connect with people on a deeper level?
That's a really thought-provoking question, and I don't think there's one right answer. It's something we each need to figure out for ourselves.
I agree. There's definitely a lot to think about there. This deep dive has been so eye-opening and inspiring. I feel motivated to start applying these strategies in my own life. It's amazing how much potential there is for growth and happiness when we challenge those old beliefs and start being our true selves.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's been incredible exploring these concepts with you.
And to our listener who requested this topic, thank you. We hope you got a lot out of it.
Yeah, if anything resonated with you, let us know. Share your thoughts on social media or leave a comment below.
And as always, we highly recommend checking out the full source material, Dr. Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy. There's so much more to uncover.
Definitely worth a read.
That's it for this week's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into No More Mr. Nice Guy. We were just talking about, that fine line between becoming the ideal man and maybe overcorrecting, swinging too far in the other direction.
Right. Could there be a danger in becoming so focused on our own needs that we lose sight of, being considerate of others?
Exactly. Is there a version of the ideal man, maybe Ideal Man 2.0, where you can be strong, but also sensitive, assertive, but also compassionate?
That's a great question. And I think the video, even though it doesn't spell out Ideal Man 2.0, it definitely gives us some hints.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of hints?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up is self-awareness. The ideal man, he's in tune with his feelings, his motivations. That helps him make conscious choices about how he interacts with people.
Yeah, it's not about just bulldozing over everyone else to get what you want.
Right. It's about understanding how your actions impact others, too. And the whole section on integrity, that also points towards this balance.
How so?
Well, choosing honesty over deceit, aligning your actions with your values, That doesn't scream selfish jerk, does it?
True, true. It's like our guy Mark, remember? Let's say he's getting better at setting boundaries.
Okay, yeah.
But he's doing it in a way that respects his girlfriend. Like,
Mhm.
he explains why something doesn't work for him, not just hitting her with a no.
I get it. It's firm, but not harsh. He's honoring his needs, but also being considerate.
Exactly. The video also emphasizes that this whole transformation isn't about, like, becoming a different person. It's about being your true self.
And being your true self, that means letting yourself be vulnerable. You can't really be open and honest with people if you're hiding parts of yourself.
That's a good point. So even this ideal man, with all his strength and self-assurance, he's still capable of connecting with people on a deeper level.
Definitely. And, the book talks about how society often tries to squeeze men into these narrow roles. The ideal man, in a way, he's like breaking out of that box.
He's saying, I'm not going to be defined by these limited ideas of what a man should be.
Exactly. He embraces all of his emotions. He's not afraid to cry, to be tender, to be supportive. Those aren't weaknesses.
They're signs of being a well-rounded human being.
Exactly. And even in those strategies for transformation, there's this element of connection, right? Bonding with other men, going to therapy, expressing your feelings. It all takes vulnerability and a willingness to reach out.
Yeah, you can't do it alone. It's not about being some lone wolf. The ideal man understands the value of support, of community.
So to circle back to your Ideal Man 2.0 idea,
Yeah.
I think the potential is already there in Dr. Glover's work. It's about continuing to evolve, to move beyond those rigid definitions of masculinity.
And remembering that personal growth, it's an ongoing process.
Totally. We're always learning, growing, trying to become better versions of ourselves.
Well, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to how much those beliefs about what it means to be a man can hold us back.
It's been eye-opening for me, too.
And it's given us some great tools to start challenging those beliefs and creating more fulfilling lives.
For sure.
Big thanks to our listener who requested this topic. We hope you found it helpful. If anything resonated with you, let us know on social media or in the comments.
Yeah. And don't forget to check out the full source material, No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's a deep dive in itself.
Absolutely.